in a series called This Is Your Idea. And I'm very excited about that. We do this every summer, and to me, it's a part of our DNA at the church. You guys have submitted to us the topics that you want to hear about. And so it takes a lot of the pressure off of us as a staff, because if you don't like today's message, it was your idea, right? There you go. I'm really excited about this particular topic that we're going to talk about today, because I think it's timely for our culture. I think there's a reason why so many of you really wrote in about it. It's something that we're curious about. The question that came in was, what about other beliefs? What about other religions and belief systems? What about other things that people believe? I think this is really, really important. The main thing about this, one of the big things, is this is a lot more than what we can cover on a Sunday morning, right? There are a lot of religions and a lot of belief systems, and I feel like God has given me a direction to really tackle and to address some of the things that are going on, really in America and in the world right now. But I'd also like to extend an invitation that if you want to go deeply into each belief system, right now I'm teaching a class on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock here at the church, so there's childcare programs. It's called Christianity, Cults, and World Religions. And we're only through 1 week's worth of material, so you didn't miss a lot. We won't meet this Wednesday because of the 4th of July, but on the 11th we will. And then we move systematically through all the belief systems and talk about what they believe and how it was formed and how that compares to Christianity through it. But I really feel like God has given us something special today to take a look at, what we can do really in our time. How many of you like theme parks? You like theme parks? I'm a Disney kid. I grew up on Disney. I mean, as most of us really do. In Florida. We didn't take a lot of vacations as a kid. We didn't have a ton of money. We weren't, country travelers or world travelers or even state-by-state travelers. But my dad's work would give him tickets to Disney every single year. And back then, Disney also didn't cost a fortune like it does now, right? You have to take out a small mortgage just for your family to go. But we used to get those tickets. And so we would go to Disney pretty much every single year. And so I can remember all the experiences, the first time that I rode all the rides, the first time that I met all the characters, all that stuff. It was really a staple growing up. But then, you grow up and things change and things get different. And I haven't really visited very many theme parks. But a good friend of mine was up in the Atlanta area, and he invited me to go to a theme park called Six Flags. And they're everywhere. We got some Six Flags fans. Yeah, there you go. Somebody's excited about it. Six Flags, it's no Disney, but, I don't know. I just lost the guy in the back. He's like, I don't care. But it was a good time, and one of their things, they're kind of like Busch Gardens in a way. They're like built on roller coasters and different things like along those lines. And they had, the first time I'd experienced it, they had a fast pass so that you could just pay a little bit more money and go to the front of every line. Where has that been my whole life, right? I wish they would have had that when I was growing up. I can remember standing in line for rides for like 2 hours in Florida heat. You're like sweating and like, you know what I mean? It's like not as fun. But what we decided to do, we bought the fast passes and we decided to try to ride every ride in Six Flags in a day. All of them. So we literally went with no hesitation from ride to ride to ride to make it all the way through Six Flags. We're looking at all these people in lines and we're beeping this thing and going to the front of the line, and we're like, you almost feel guilty when you do it because they're like standing and sweating and you're like, and you just go on it, right? But it is what it is. So we're riding all these different rides, and they have different ways to experience roller coasters. You've got bucket seats, like the traditional, where you're in this like car and you sit down and this lap thing comes down and you're good to go. And you've got the ones now where you're sort of horizontal, you're like Superman, and you kind of get in it and you experience the roller coaster like you were flying, sort of like Superman. This particular one that we came up to about halfway through the day, we'd probably ridden already like 6, 7 roller coasters, something like that. This was one where you stand up in it, where the whole time you were standing and you get on it and get ready to go. And we did our fast pass. We got on it. We put the seatbelt on and the harness came down and the ride took off. And we're on the initial climb up. Now, it doesn't take that long, so all of these things I'm about ready to tell you happens within the context of 5 or 6 seconds. But shortly after my portion of the roller coaster started to make its climb, my harness came up. I kid you not, I'm coming up the ride, and I'm sitting there, and the harness comes up. And I am not kidding you, the very first thought that came through my head was, I'm gonna be that guy. You know what I mean? Because like every once in a while, you do see an article where somebody at a major theme park gets ejected from a roller coaster. I mean, tens of thousands of people ride these things, but there's the one guy who gets booted and, rest in peace, whatever, right? There you go. And so my first thought is, I'm gonna be that guy. Oh man. And so I do what you do in that time. I try to pull it down, I try to pull it down, and I try to pull it down. And I'm on this climb. I turn around and I start yelling at the person who's in charge of the ride, right? I'm like, stop the ride, stop the ride. My harness came up. But then I realized one of two things are happening. There's probably a lot of people that get freaked out and start yelling at roller coasters, right? I mean, they start going around, stop the ride, I'm scared, whatever things are going on. Two, he must not have been paid enough money because he did not listen to me. And so this ride continues to ascend. I'm looking over at Chris. I thought about unbuckling and jumping. I thought, just jump. I mean, you're going to get tossed and ejected. You might as well just abort, jump. You're going to break a leg, whatever's going to happen. But at least you're not going to die, that sort of thing. But I pulled it down again. And then for whatever reason, and it had to be a God thing because maybe it just wasn't my time to go, all of a sudden I think, lower your center of gravity. I don't know why. I mean, this is all in the course of like seconds worth of time because it's not like you're climbing forever. It's not that sort of thing. It's really, whatever it is, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. I just think lower your center of gravity. So I grab onto the harness because I'm going to grab onto anything that I can get a hold of. And I get down all the way in the bottom of a squat. And somewhere in the bottom of the squat, all of a sudden I hear this click. And the harness engages. And I'm very thankful for this harness to have engaged in this moment, but then I realize that I am now stuck in the bottom of a squat on this God blessed roller coaster. And so I start to hear the click, 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 click. It's getting going. I can't see a thing. All I can see is this sheet of metal in front of me. And people are starting to go, the front of the roller coaster comes down, people are going, woo, ah, and I'm just, like the whole time, I'm just grabbing onto this thing for dear life because I know it could let go at any moment. It let go the first time, it might let go the second time. And so we go through the turns and the loops and the spins and everything else that happens. I'm just looking, I'm praying. I don't even know really what's going on. It happens so fast. We finally get to the end of the ride. I exit it. And the weirdest thing, I wasn't even mad. You know what I mean? Like, I thought I would be mad. I was just like, I made it. It was like I'd won the lottery. You know what I mean? There's like disbelief. I'm not dead. Yes. I thought about it afterwards, and I think I should have addressed the crowd and been like, listen, don't go on this ride. You could die. Got on the nearest, highest thing and made my proclamation. I told him about it. I was like, the harness came up on the thing. I just didn't have words. I had no way to really describe what was going on. But I'll tell you one thing, the ground never, ever felt so good. I think this is important because when we look at our culture today, we are on the roller coaster now. Anybody feel that way? I think most of us feel that way. I think it doesn't matter what belief system you come from, what things dominate how you make decisions ultimately in the world. I think that everybody can feel this. From all walks, from all angles, everyone can sense it. We've lost our bearings, our horizon, our solid ground. We're in the middle of this roller coaster that loops us left and loops us right. And if you doubt that at all, I just want you to notice one thing. Have you ever noticed how fast we move on from issue to issue to issue? How quickly it rises, and it's on everyone's conscience, and everyone is outraged about something, no matter what, only for 7 days later for almost nothing to have changed, but for it not to matter anymore because we're in the next spin and the next loop and the next turn. We yell at the top of our lungs only to be pulled in by something else. And you know what? I have friends that have t-shirts, closets full of t-shirts, full of causes. And in the moment, it was right to wear it, and to do it, and to move. But now it's nothing. You see, we live in a culture that has discarded truth in exchange for preference. We've discarded truth, and we've moved on to a system of preference. See, preference is the roller coaster. In the moment, it's what we prefer, what we believe, what we think, and it pulls us into the next turn and flips us around. But the solid ground of life, that's God's truth. The thing that gets us off the roller coaster is God's truth. And see, this is more than just an issue of feelings or opinions. Things have shifted in the culture and in the world around us. We've stopped believing in things being true and things being false. And so we no longer make decisions based upon whether we believe something to be true or false. We make decisions based upon what we prefer at the time. You know, there's a quote from a writer, and this is what he said. One writer put it this way: "There is now only preferred and unpreferred, pleasant and unpleasant, liked and disliked." You see, what we have in our culture now is more of a sense of, well, that may be true, but that's not really what I want. And so we'll log onto our social media and we'll see a video about a cause, and we'll click the video and we'll watch it. And we'll make life decisions based off of the information that we get. We'll think things, we'll be swayed by things, but we don't think, is this true or is this false? We think, do I prefer this? Is this pleasant or unpleasant? Do I like it or do I not like it? And this is really, really difficult because oftentimes the truth is unpreferred. Oftentimes the truth is unpleasant. And oftentimes the truth is disliked. But if it's true, it's better for us. It takes us somewhere. You see, we desire this preference in our life because we desire autonomy above all else. You want to know what the most dominant religion in America actually really is right now? It's the religion of autonomy. So religion says, I get to choose what's real. I get to choose the future based upon what I like. Have you noticed how any issue that comes up today, we are so emotionally thin to things that contradict us? The second that somebody disagrees with us, how quickly does it move from friend to foe? There really is no middle ground anymore. You know, it used to be if somebody had a different opinion than you would just say, well, who asked you? You know what I mean? Be like, great, nobody cares. You can A, B, C your way out of it, right? It's not that way anymore. There's no room for that anymore. And you want to know why? Because if you disagree with me, you are threatening my autonomy. I feel like my ability to choose my preferred future is under fire because of it. And I tell you what this does is it pushes us to the extremes. Have you noticed that? On any issue, there are not even any middle grounds. There are not any moderate positions anymore. Everybody is pushed to the extreme of whatever the issue is, to the extreme to the right, to the extreme to the left of whatever problem that they're ultimately trying to solve. And the reason for that is nobody prefers to hear things that disagree with them. And so what we'll find is that we'll follow the path of least disagreement until we're in a camp of people that just agree with us. And honestly, you could take any issue and filter it through that lens. You filter it through the lens of preference. You filter it through the lens of autonomy. You filter it through it, and it will make perfect sense how we got here. And you know what? We're not going to go through all of the issues. I won't spend time naming them because what God has for us today is bigger than any issue. It's bigger than solving any one problem. What God has for us today is a different way of thinking. You know, there's a story where Jesus speaks of two types of people. It's in Matthew 7. And I really like this story because it is so plain. The meaning of it is so plain. Sometimes when Jesus tells stories, it's purposely difficult. You look at it and you go, what are you talking about, Jesus? And he did that on purpose because he wanted us to chew on it and to wrestle with it and to think through it. And then there are other times where Jesus says, you know what? I don't even want you to really think. So I'm going to tell you a story that's so plain and so on the surface that nobody's going to miss it no matter what. And this is one of those stories. And this is what he says. He says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house. And yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell. And great was its fall. The story is so simple in its meaning. When you hear that, you instantaneously know which person you would want to be. Who wants to be the kind of person that builds their house? Their house in Jesus' story, that's your life. That's your future. That's your safety, your direction, your purpose, all of that. That's the house that he's talking. Who would want to build their future on a foundation that as soon as the rain and the winds and the floods come, because always rains and winds and floods always come, who would want to build their house on the sand and have everything that you've worked so hard for get blown away when you have the option of building your future upon the solid foundation of the rock? So that when the rains come and the winds blow, you're safe. You know, in the 1970s, Russian scientists set out on an endeavor to drill a hole into the Earth's crust. You know, we know a lot more about outer space than we do even about our own oceans or even the ground below our feet. And so they set on a journey. It took decades worth of time. And they decided to drill down as deep as they possibly could for decades. The name of this particular hole, it's called the Kola Super Deep Borehole. Isn't that a funny name? Doesn't that sound like something that you would call your friend if they were being a jerk? Dude, you are being a super deep borehole right now. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was cool. During the course of this journey, somewhere down deep within the earth, they found water. Nobody knew that there was water deep within the earth's crust. They found single-celled organisms and life deep within the earth's crust. By the time everything was said and done, they had bored 7.5 miles into the earth. That is so deep. When I read that, I was like, wow. It almost seemed scary it was so deep. I was like, that's like halfway, right? Actually, the earth is like 4,000 miles to get to the center of it. So when you think about it, it's not very far, considering how deep that it is. But it was far enough that they had to stop drilling because it was 356 degrees at the bottom of the hole. And so it was melting drill bits and things. It was just as far as they could go. Here's what I know. There are two realities that are stacked against our ability to run our life through preference and autonomy. And the first one is if we were to drill deeply within the heart of man, all the way to its core, as far as we could possibly go, the Bible tells us what we'll find. Jeremiah 17:9, it says this: "The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it?" You see, if I'm left to myself, to choosing my future based on the things that I prefer, I am always going to choose a way that will end up harming myself. Because that's my heart. That's my chooser on the inside. It's wicked and deceitful. And when I think about these things, when I think about things that I prefer that would ultimately harm me, how many of you would like to eat dessert with every meal? Wouldn't that be nice? Like every meal with a warm bowl of something with some a la mode on the top? But if you're a doctor, if you work in the healthcare industry, a lifetime of doing that ends in a special thing called type 2 diabetes. That may be what I want, that may be what I prefer, but it would harm me. How about something maybe a little bit more real? Wouldn't we like it in our flesh if sex was free? If it was open? Ultimately harmless? Where you could have it with any person that you want? Isn't there a part of the human heart that would prefer that? There's a reason why it's on every television show on TV now. Free sex in one way or another. Because it sells. It's often the desire of our heart. But if we go that way, it'll harm us. Or how many of us would prefer if we had every material thing that the world had to offer us? If we could just keep collecting over and over and over and getting and bigger and more and more. But there's nobody that's ever lived that life that said this was the best, because it's never satisfied. That kind of life is always alone because it harms us. See, at the end of all of our indulgences, our preferences take us towards a future where we don't find happiness. We don't find satisfaction. And even more important than we allow it to be, we ultimately don't find purpose. There is no purpose in these things, which is the real satisfaction of life. If you drill deeply into every single belief system, every single issue outside of the truth of God, every single movement outside of the truth of God that tries to offer a solution to this, you find the same thing. You'll find a journey through life where it's up to you to work harder and to be better and to do good and to try to earn your way into the best future. But the reality is, we're not good enough to do that. Our strength fades. Our resolve goes away. And in the end, even if we do it to the best of our ability, the truth of God says something else that's hard to hear. It says the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons and not to God. I do not want you to participate with demons. That means that even if you do it right, it doesn't matter what the religion or the belief system, and you do your best, the future, what's behind those things, is actually offered to the enemy of our soul. And I'll tell you what's so important about this. These are the paths to the life that has built its house on the sand. It can't stand to the rain or to the winds. But there's a pressure on us. There's a pressure on us to take a look at these issues and to say, you know what? It's okay for other people to choose these things. There's a pressure on us to say, it's okay, I'll choose my way and you choose your way. But the reality is we can't allow ourselves to go there. It's not okay because we're dealing about issues of life and death. This is whether our houses stand or fall. Jesus talks about this. He talks about a better way. He says this in John chapter 14, verse 6. You want to know what the foundation that's solid looks like? It says, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. See, Jesus is telling us in clear terms, and he says this over and over and over, his most famous sayings, that the way to solid ground is through him, through his truth. And that this truth is a direction. That's his words. The way, the truth, and the life. It is a direction that your life will go. It is a lens through which we filter all of the decisions of our day. And this is really important for us because if you have a relationship with God, we have to get to the point where we allow things, all the decisions of life, all of our opinions and preferences to come subject to his foundation, regardless of what we prefer. And can I tell you something? The pressure has never been higher to get us to conform to what the culture around us feels about any given issue. It's never been greater. The pressure for us to accept things around us that God says is not true and not right and leads to a life built on sand of which we will ultimately die. The pressure on your life to conform to that, to say, I know what God says is true, but I would prefer it to be this way, has never been higher. And can I tell you that it's okay to struggle with that? It's okay to look at an issue, this may shock you, and to say, God, it's hard for me to believe that way. It's difficult for me to think about it. God, I know all my friends are going in this direction, and they believe it's okay, and they're pressuring me to accept it as well. That it's okay to say, I would prefer it if it was another way other than God's way. Did you know that Jesus struggled with that? Even in the garden, What did Jesus say? He was about ready to go to the cross and to die for our sins, to conquer sin and death for us. That's how we have a relationship with him. And what did he say? Father, if there is any other way, let this cup pass from me. In other words, I would prefer not to die the most horrible death that I could possibly imagine, even though he knew full well what was going to be accomplished at the cross. But at the end of that struggle, what did he say? Father, I understand, not my will, but your will be done, God. If that's what you want me to do, even though it's unpreferred, unpleasant, God, disliked, who would like to do that? I will still choose your way. And Christians, I'm telling you, as the years go on, it is going to get harder and harder and harder to make those decisions. That's why we have to move from our preferences to this sense of autonomy. We have to move to the worldview that, God, if you say it's true, no matter how hard it is, God, I will work on that. I will live that out in the world around me with kindness and compassion and gentleness, God, but I will do it your way no matter what. You know, if you're here this morning and you don't have a relationship with God, I want to encourage you, and it really encourages all of us, that what God offers us, his truth, even though there are times where we'll make hard decisions and do things that we don't like so that we can have our best future, if you drill deeply into the heart of God, what you will find is beautiful. He is wonderful. God's truth is better than we could have ever imagined it, even when it's hard for us to follow it. You know, there's a scripture passage that gets me every single time because it tells us about a God that flips the script. It tells us about a God from which we don't have to pursue in order to find goodness and truth and rightness, but it tells us about a God that has flipped the script who pursues us. You know, in Psalms 139, listen to this. This is what it says. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise up on wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and light will become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. You know what this tells me? That whatever decisions I've made in my life, whatever things that I've done, whatever future I feel like I've laid, and whatever foundation my house is on right now, the Lord knows the depths of your heart. He knows the words that you speak even before they come out of your mouth. And he still loves you. He still wants you. And no matter how hard you try to get away from him, on the highest peak or the lowest low, on the other side of an ocean, no matter where you go, this God pursues you. He is never far from you because his love for you is unending. And even if you find yourself right now in the darkest of days and you feel overwhelmed, he is right beside you, offering his light of love and to take your house and to move it from the sand and onto his firm foundation forever. And he will never let go of you. He will teach you his truth. He will guide you through the darkest of days. And he will ensure your absolute best future. Because that's the kind of God that he is. That's the kind of love that he has for you. So I want to encourage you today to take a risk on him. What would it look like? What would it look like to step out and say, God, I want your foundation. I want the kind of relationship that we've been talking about today. I don't want to be driven by preference and autonomy anymore. But no matter how hard it is, God, I just want to be with you. I want to be in the midst of that kind of love, God, that never ends, knowing that you're always for me. You know, there's no magic word. There's no incantation. There's not even a magic prayer that gets you there. Do you know what gets you into his family and into that life? It's a condition of your heart. It's a work that he does within you right now. If you literally tell him right now in this moment, God, I want that. He gives it freely to you. Because of the sacrifice that he made on the cross, it is yours. You are now a part of his family. You are now a part of his future. He will teach you his truth and guide you throughout the rest of your life. Because you are now on the firm foundation. Church, this is going to get harder and harder and harder. But there is no limit to the goodness of our God to lead us through it. Trust his truth. Funnel every decision of life through it and allow him to do what only he can do. That's to guide you in his ways everlasting. Let's pray. God, we thank you for who you are. God, we thank you for your truth. God, we acknowledge today how difficult this is. How difficult it is to be guided by preference and autonomy. And to choose, God, to move away from that and to step into your truth, God. Sometimes it can feel like it's so hard and so far away. But God, today, that's what we want more than anything. We want your truth, God. We want your direction, God. We don't want to be on the roller coaster anymore, God. We want to feel safe on your firm foundation. God, I pray that you would help us with that. In moments of decision, when we're deciding what we're thinking about all of the hard issues of life, God, I pray that your truth would well up within us. Would the things that we're reading from you and learning from you and experiencing together from you, God, show us what the truth is and allow us to choose what you have over the way that the world is going. God, I pray that if there's somebody here today and in their hearts they said that they want you. They want you to be their God today, God. God, I pray that you would begin your work in them, that you would begin teaching them and showing them, God, what their future looks like. You'd help us to be the church family around them so that they can grow in you. God, help them to reach out to somebody and to tell them about the decision that they've made today. God, we thank you so much for your truth and for your life. God, you are our rock and our salvation. We pray all this in your name, in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Amen.